Premier League, the pinnacle of the English football pyramid, and for teams that climb to that summit, it offers the chance to play against some of the biggest teams in world football. The financial rewards for reaching the top division are frequently hailed by analysts and pundits, often referred to as one of the most lucrative prizes in all of world club football.
The most lucrative match in world club football.
See? But for all this talk of riches, we here at Numbers Behind the Net want to know: does promotion to the Premier League actually pay? Well, we've chosen 5 teams that achieved promotion over the last decade and have stayed up for at least 5 seasons to see what actually happens to their finances when they reach the promised land of the Premier League. How do we do this? We've trawled through Companies House, analysing 10 years of financial statements for each club and distilled their financial performance down to 3 key metrics: revenue, profitability, cash flows. So, if you want to see just how lucrative reaching the top really is, join us as Numbers Behind the Net presents Premier League Promotion. Does it pay? Chapter 5: The Foxes. Well, let's see how Leicester got on off the pitch. We find Leicester at the top of the second tier in 2013, with promotion back to the Premier League secured in the next season. Not only would Leicester stage a heroic survival bid in their first year, but on May 2nd, 2016, the ultimate dream would be realised, with 5,000 to 1 shots Leicester City winning the Premier League title. Champions League football was the prize, with the Foxes reaching the quarter-finals before being put to the sword by Atletico Madrid. Leicester would continue to succeed on the pitch, but suffer off of it with the tragic death of club owner Vichai Siwatana Prava. Leicester would finish this decade with 2 near misses to return to Champions League football, but they would establish themselves as a top-half Premiership team. Well, this is our first look at a Premier League champion alongside Champions League football. Let's see what the impact was on the financials. First up, revenue. Here we have Leicester's 2 years in the Championship, followed by 8 in the Premier League, but let's pop in those years they had European football. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. By now, we know there is a significant uplift from promotion to the Premier League, but there's even greater swings within Leicester's top flight years. The first thing to point out is Leicester generated over 100 million more the year after winning the title, compared to the year they lifted the trophy. Let's zoom in on those 2 years to see what's driving this. We know that TV money is the bulk of Premier League revenues, but what happens the year after that title win? Firstly, European football. A run into the knockout stages of the Champions League landed the Foxes another £70 million. We can start to understand why that race for 4th spot is so important.
In Champions League. We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next question.
Dilly-ding-dilly-dong, come on.
Broadcasting revenues also increased by 25 million, despite Leicester finishing 12th in 2017, rather than 1st the year before. There are 2 things likely going on here. Firstly, Leicester likely received more televised games following their historic triumph the year before, and alongside this, we've seen before that new TV deal kicked in this year, with all teams getting an uplift. But heading back to the revenue picture, the years with European football are certainly higher. By league position, we see that those with European campaigns reign, with an average of 225 million a year, versus 144 in the years without, a 56% increase. But did Premier League success and European football translate to the bottom line? Let's look at profitability. As with all other teams, we see significant losses in the Championship, whereas those early Premier League years are a dream. The Champions League season netted a £95 million profit, undoubtedly the biggest we've seen. But after, the story starts to unravel. From 2019 onwards, it's losses all the way, with a staggering £74 million loss in 2022. The grouping by league position or by European football doesn't show us too much. It's the timeline where we need to be. It truly is a tale of 2 halves for Leicester City's Premier League journey. So what's going on?
If you don't know the answer to that question, then I think you are an ostrich.
For the last time in this series, let's hit the timer, grey out that revenue, and step through the P&L. First up, staff costs. This already starts to reveal the answer. In that title-winning season, Leicester City had a wage bill of just £80 million. To handle the extra demands of European football, that jumps to 113 the following season. However, with the additional Champions League revenue, it's less proportionally. The problems mount in the subsequent years when staff costs continue to increase despite reduced revenues. As a percentage, the Foxes went from wages being under 50% of total revenue up to 85% in 2022. This is the hidden cost of trying to preserve your team's place amongst the elite. Next up, operating expenses. These increase with the extra demands of European football, as well as investment in facilities, and at the EBITDA level, we already see the decline in profitability from Leicester's fourth year in the Premier League onwards. Stadium and facilities, the costs associated with the King Power and other long-term assets, as usual, are smaller, so we move straight on to transfer fees. Here's the other half of that familiar 1-2 punch. Leicester in fact made a further profit in transfer related activities in the Champions League year. Still, after that, costs continue to spiral as they chase to reclaim past glories. By 2022, that's over 65 million. Costs continue to increase whether or not the success is sustained, with the P&L taking big hits over the last 4 years. Let's compare the first 4 with the second. Despite increasing revenue in years 5 to 8, the operating profit margin has flipped from a healthy 23% to a 22% loss. A giant swing.
Hugely disappointing. And
what about cash? As always, we'll be looking at the combination of cash from operations and cash from transfer fees to assess what's happened. First up, operational cash is brought in by those EBITDA line items, and as to be expected, the story here matches with what we saw with profitability. We could ignore the impact of league position. Those first 4 years generated an average of 41 million cash coming in, flipping to 6 going out in each of the next 4. And transfers? Well, it's just cash going out. In their 8-year stint, the net spend has been 217 million. 28 million per year in the first 4, slightly reducing in the next. So where does that leave the Foxes? The first 4 years saw an average of 12 million cash come into the club. But in those later years, over 30 million a year has gone out the door. So after 8 consecutive years in the Prem, winning the league, securing Champions League football, the result is 75 million cash has gone out of the club despite having earned 1.4 billion in revenue. You are never safe as an upstart club in the Premier League. Not even the phenomenal feat of winning the whole thing gives you any type of prolonged financial security. And what's happened since? Well, unfortunately things go from bad to worse the following year, with Leicester falling into the relegation places, ending their top flight status after 9 seasons. So is there any good news? Well, at the time of recording, Leicester are trying to bounce back like Burnley and currently lead the Championship. So a return to the Premier League may be on the cards, but at what cost? Next week, join us as we recap what we've learned as we conclude Premier League promotion, does it pay? See you next time.